Have you ever wondered what happened to the MG42 gunners who surrendered after cutting down waves of Allied soldiers on the beaches of Normandy? Today, we're going to uncover their fate and the lesser-known stories hidden inside the largest military operation in history. But before that, we need to set the stage. The MG42 first appeared in 1942, and from that moment on it followed German troops to every front of the war. North Africa, the Eastern Front, Italy, and finally the beaches of Normandy. By D-Day, it was the most feared weapon in the German arsenal, not because of its specifications on paper, but because of what it did in reality. It fired so fast, over 1,200 rounds per minute, that Allied soldiers said it didn't sound like a gun at all, more like tearing fabric or a buzzsaw cutting through wood. A single MG42 could hold down dozens of men, and entire waves of infantry could be stopped by only one nest. Each gun usually had a crew of 3. The gunner, the assistant gunner, feeding fresh belts of ammunition and swapping barrels when they overheated, and the third man, hauling extra ammo, sometimes up to 1,500 rounds stuffed into metal boxes. Many of these crews had combat experience from Russia or Italy. By 1944, though, others were teenage replacements who had never fired in anger until that morning. Regardless of their background, their mission was the same: keep firing until the invasion was broken, or die in place. German commanders had designed the coast for exactly that. They built strong points called Widerstandsnester, resistance nests, each one reinforced with concrete and placed so their fields of fire overlapped. Cannons, mortars, and machine guns could cover every approach from the surf to the sand dunes. On Omaha Beach alone, there were 15 of these strong points. Many were positioned so they could fire directly along the shoreline, ensuring that soldiers who dodged one gun would walk straight into another. From a distance, the defenses looked like empty cliffs and bluffs. Up close, they were honeycombed with bunkers, trenches, and firing ports, with MG42s at the center of it all. For the Allies about to land, those nests were the difference between life and death. For the German gunners inside them, they were both a shield and a trap. The invasion began with fire. Before dawn on June 6th, Allied battleships, cruisers, and destroyers opened up on the French coast. Thousands of shells slammed into the bluffs above Omaha and the other landing beaches. The plan was simple on paper: crush the strong points, silence the guns, and leave only broken concrete for the infantry to clear. But reinforced bunkers are stubborn things. Many nests rode out the bombardment with little damage. When the smoke lifted, German gunners crawled back to their weapons and stared out at a sight that seemed impossible: hundreds of landing craft pushing through the waves. The Allies were counting on armor to break open the defenses, but on Omaha that plan collapsed almost instantly. Duplex drive Sherman tanks were launched offshore, meant to swim onto the beach and support the infantry. Out of 32 launched in the first wave, 27 sank in the rough seas. Only 5 made it to shore. Of those, just 3 were in fighting condition, and they were knocked out quickly. With the tanks gone, the burden shifted entirely to the men in the landing craft. That was when the MG42s opened up. The sound carried across the surf, flat, mechanical, unbroken. Allied soldiers called it Hitler's buzzsaw, and once it began, it almost never stopped. German gunners used tactics honed on other fronts. They swept low across the sand, a method they called mowing the grass, cutting legs out from under charging infantry and forcing men to crawl. Wounded soldiers often drew in medics and comrades, creating new clusters of easy targets. Some crews fired tracers high on purpose, making it look like the bullets were off target, while hidden guns fired at chest height where the killing was real. The effect was devastating. Landing craft ramps dropped, and entire squads were shredded before they reached the sand. At Dog Green Sector, one company lost nearly 90% of its men in minutes. Other sectors were pinned flat, every attempt to move forward cut down before it began. The bombardment had failed, the armor was gone, and the infantry were exposed on an open beach with almost nowhere to hide. Shell craters, tank obstacles, even the bodies of the dead became cover. Officers shouted at their men to sprint forward during the MG42's brief pauses for reloading or barrel changes. Those seconds were measured in heartbeats. and many who tried never made it far. Some units began to break through only in small groups, inching up the beach with rifles, grenades, and raw determination. The fight for Omaha had become exactly what the German commanders intended, a killing ground. And at its heart were the MG42 crews, cutting down wave after wave of soldiers, even as the tide of the invasion pressed closer to their bunkers. Breaking through to a machine gun bunker was only half the battle. The real fight began in the seconds after you reached it. The MG42's field of fire was brutal at a distance, but up close the weapon's greatest strength became a weakness. Heavy firing ports protected the gunners from the front, but trapped them inside once attackers got near. There was no easy way out. Assault teams carried what they needed to finish the job: grenades, satchel charges, flamethrowers. The sequence was always the same: close the distance, throw explosives through the openings, then storm the position with rifles. Flamethrowers were the most feared. A burst into the firing slit didn't just clear the gun. It turned the entire bunker into an oven. Many nests were taken this way, silenced in seconds after hours of holding up entire companies. On Omaha, one small American team with a bazooka went after WN-61, a strong point pouring fire across the sand. They destroyed the 50mm anti-tank gun first, then crawled forward to silence each MG42 crew one by one. 7 German defenders were killed, 2 guns destroyed. The price: 1 man dead, 1 wounded. It was brutal arithmetic, but it bought breathing room for hundreds of soldiers pinned on the beach. Elsewhere, Rangers stormed dog white under the cover of smoke. Engineers cleared obstacles on easy red, and infantry clawed their way up the bluffs. Every advance was paid for in blood. Men were often cut down within meters of their target, seconds before they could throw a grenade or light a satchel charge. For those who survived long enough to get inside a bunker, the fight was short, violent, and final. Not every gunner lived to surrender. Many were killed outright in their firing positions. Others, wounded or out of ammunition, tried to give themselves up. Some were spared and taken prisoner, but not all. Accounts exist of German MG crews shot on the spot by men who had just watched their friends cut down. The Geneva Convention required prisoners to be taken, and most Allied soldiers followed it. But in the chaos of Omaha, discipline and rage often collided. For the men behind the MG42s, there was no illusion about their chances. The weapon that made them so feared also made them the most hated targets on the battlefield. To stay behind the gun was to accept that you might never walk away. For Allied infantry, facing an MG42 was pure terror. Many of the men in the first wave were fresh out of training, with no combat experience. Long before they saw the beach, they heard the sound, flat, mechanical, endless. Veterans later admitted it froze the blood. Soldiers stepped off the landing craft and instinctively dropped, hugging the sand as if it could shield them. Squad leaders screamed for men to keep moving, reminding them that lying still meant dying in place. Even so, some companies were nearly erased in the first minutes. Casualties so heavy that entire units ceased to exist. Medics remembered bullets slicing through the water, striking men still struggling in the surf. At Dog Green, one company lost almost 9 out of every 10 soldiers before they could reach cover. Yet amid the chaos, men still rose and moved forward. Some obeyed orders, some clung to duty, and some simply understood that their only chance was to charge the gun that was killing them. Inside the bunkers, the view was different but no less terrifying. Many MG crews were not battle-hardened fanatics, but conscripts. Young Germans, Austrians, even men from occupied Eastern Europe pressed into service. Some had never fired the weapon before that morning. They were told to hold until death. For them, the sound of boots crunching closer outside was a death sentence. Every thump of grenades against the walls, every rattle of rifle fire in the trench carried the same thought: this is the moment they come for me. The pressure was immense. The MG42 made them the most effective defenders on the beach, but also the most doomed. They knew the Allies wanted them dead more than anyone else. Survival depended not just on their skill, but on the mercy of soldiers who had just watched friends fall to their fire. When the fighting on the beaches finally broke, a handful of German gunners lived long enough to surrender. Some concealed their role, hoping to pass as ordinary riflemen. Others were captured openly, stunned to still be alive after hours behind a gun that had killed so many. The treatment of these men varied. Most were taken prisoner under the rules of war. A few, according to scattered accounts, were executed in the chaos. Reprisals unrecorded in official reports. One who survived was Heinrich So, a 20-year-old gunner at Strong Point WN62. He fired nearly 12,000 rounds that morning, alone after his assistant was killed, watching ship after ship pour more men onto the beach no matter how many he cut down. By afternoon, his ammunition was gone, his position collapsing. He ran, hid in shell holes and hedges, and surrendered the next morning. For decades, he kept silent, then later sought peace by speaking with Allied veterans, including David Silva, an American he had wounded. Two men who once tried to kill each other now sat across a table in reconciliation neither could have imagined in 1944. Most MG42 veterans never spoke much of their war. They went home to farms, towns, and families, carrying memories they rarely shared. For them, the gun was both a point of grim pride and lasting guilt. For the Allies, the MG42 was remembered like a storm, something you never forget if you live through it. The bunkers in Normandy still stand, silent reminders of the gun's power and the morning when it nearly stopped the liberation of Europe. The MG42 bought Germany hours on D-Day, not victory. For its gunners, the weapon that made them feared also made them doomed. If you want more untold stories from the front lines of history, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. We're only just getting started. These stories aren't just about weapons or battles. They're about the men who lived them and the ones who never came home.